Joecelyn and the Full Moon. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Joecelyn who lived with her parents and little brother Thomas in a small cottage in a remote little village. Every morning, Mama would prepare a fragrant breakfast for everyone. After the meal, Papa would lift Joecelyn onto his strong shoulders and take her to feed their cow Bessie. Thomas would toddle behind them, giggling as Bessie licked his cute little toes with her big tongue. When Papa was busy working, Joecelyn would take Thomas to wander around the winding dirt roads of the village with the neighbor kids. Sometimes when Joecelyn saw special toys, books, or pretty hair ribbons in the stores or neighbors' homes, she would beg her parents to buy them for her. But the family only had one cow, a few sheep and chickens, and were too poor to buy anything beyond necessities. Even as she pouted and pleaded, her parents could only make Joecelyn the simplest dolls or sew plain dresses from scrapped fabric. Recently, Joecelyn's shoes developed a hole, so she decided to ask her parents for a new pair. The next morning, Joecelyn bounced out of bed and said sweetly while eating breakfast, "Mama, my shoes have a hole, can you buy me a new pair?" Mama reluctantly replied, "I'm sorry dear, we can't afford new shoes recently, try wearing your current pair a little longer." Joecelyn complained disappointedly, "But my feet look so ugly in these shoes. I don't want them, I don't want them." Then she threw a tantrum all day. She didn't understand why her parents wouldn't buy her new shoes when the old ones were broken. That night as Joecelyn lay in bed, she gazed out the window at the glowing full moon. A thought struck her that made her sit up eagerly. "I heard Stevie's mom say you can make wishes to the moon, and bigger moons make wishes more likely to come true. Since it's a full moon tonight, the biggest roundest moon, I'll wish for new shoes." Clasping her hands, she shut her eyes tight and wished with all her might. "Dear moon, can you see me? My shoes are all worn out, I want a nice new pair to walk around town and dance in. Please make my wish come true." Joecelyn waited hopefully for a bit, then slowly opened one eye. She thought she saw the moon smile and wink at her, but nothing around her seemed to have changed. So she opened her other eye, only to find her old shoes still lying quietly beside the bed. With a huff, she crawled back into bed. The next morning when Joecelyn woke up, as she rubbed her eyes and put on her shoes, she realized the hole had become even bigger overnight. She felt so wrong that she nearly burst into tears. That afternoon, Papa announced great news that delighted Joecelyn. "The town cobbler is clearing out his shoes at half price. Joecelyn, let's go pick out a new pair for you." Joecelyn immediately cried wow, so excited to finally get new shoes. At the shoe shop, she happily tried on different styles, feeling they all looked nice and unable to decide. Papa patiently watched her skip and twirl around the store until she finally picked a shiny red pair. Though simple in design, the new shoes fit Joecelyn's feet nicely and looked great on her. That day as she strutted all around town, she felt like she was floating on air. From then on, whenever Joecelyn wanted something new, she would make wishes upon the moon. The moon in the sky always gazed back with a serene smile. 2 weeks later, war erupted in the country. Soon, distant bombers roared closer and closer to Joecelyn's village, dropping bombs everywhere. Tanks also crossed over the hills surrounding the village to launch strikes. Papa hastily packed up some belongings, urging we need to quickly escape somewhere else for shelter, or it'll be too late to get away. Mama picked up Thomas and pulled Joecelyn along as they followed the crowds fleeing from the invading army. Joecelyn often stumbled as she was still wearing her old worn-out shoes, unable to change into the nice new pair kept in the cabinet. All along, they saw the village had become ruins everywhere. Joecelyn clung tightly to Mama's skirt, scared of getting separated from her parents. Behind them, flames licked the thatched roofs of the cottages. Heat blasted their faces and pungent smoke filled the air. All around were villagers carrying bundles and fleeing, with no chance to even greet familiar neighbors. If they slowed down, the artillery fire drew nearer, so they could only keep rushing. After several grueling hours of trudging along, they managed to get somewhat further from the bomb blasts, and could finally rest a while. Joecelyn collapsed onto a flat rock, exhausted and shivering. Her feet throbbed painfully inside the tight shoes. But they could not rest for long. As dusk fell, Papa hoisted Thomas onto his back, saying solemnly, "We need to move faster, cannot stop to rest anymore. Today we must catch up and reach the town where others have taken shelter, or we'll be in grave danger spending the night outdoors." As their parents navigated the chaotic tree roots and loose dirt paths, Joecelyn persevered to keep up. She kept wiping the dust and sweat from her face, feeling utterly cold, weary and afraid. Close to midnight, the villagers finally located a small town to take refuge in. Everyone cleared some open ground and set up simple tents from dead branches and scraps of fabric. The family huddled together inside their makeshift shelter, embracing in relief to finally be able to rest. That night, they would sleep wrapped in tattered blankets. At first light, Joecelyn hazily awoke. She noticed Thomas looking unusually pale, and overheard Papa whisper to Mama that Thomas felt very hot and urgently needed medicine. As the first rays of dawn crept over their shelter, Papa said he would take Thomas into town, try and find a hospital, but they would need money for medical fees. In their panicked escape, they did not have much cash on hand. Mama took off her silver necklace, one of their last remaining valuables, clasping Papa's hand, saying quietly, "Use this to buy medicine if required." Then Papa carried Thomas off, with Joecelyn running up to give them both a tight hug before they departed. That whole day Joecelyn waited in the tent, refusing to budge, anxiously awaiting Papa and Thomas's return. But things did not go as hoped. At the overwhelmed hospital, Papa watched Thomas' high fever anxiously, using a wet towel to cool his burning forehead. The doctors rushed about haphazardly tending to critically injured villagers, with Papa's desperate pleas only garnering them a cursory glance at Thomas before hurrying off again. Too many refugees were flooding in far too quickly for the hospital to locate enough medicines for all. With no treatment available, Thomas' cheeks burned bright red as he moaned, barely conscious. The next day, bombers started targeting the outskirts of the town, and residents began fleeing as the situation grew precarious. Mama was also extremely anxious, but Papa and Thomas had still not returned, and they could not leave for another location either. The town telephones had been destroyed by bombing, leaving them with no way to contact or locate their missing family members. Her brows knotted tightly in distress as they could only continue waiting there. Finally, late into the night, Papa stumbled back carrying Thomas, swaying unsteadily. Usually cheerful and energetic in his stride, He now shuffled along hunched over like a rodent, the corners of his mouth twitching as he told Mama in despair, "The doctors have left, we still cannot find any medicine." Mama's face turned white at the news, and the three huddled silently in the tent gazing helplessly at Thomas, though the thunder of bombardment drew nearer and nearer. Time trickled by emptily, until the moon rose round and full. That night, while Papa and Mama tended to Thomas and packed belongings to leave at dawn, Thomas' breathing grew labored and his frail body shuddered in distress. Watching him suffer, Joecelyn could hardly bear it. She turned away towards a rip in the tent fabric, gazing out at the distant hills, suddenly recalling the magic of the full moon. Wary of disturbing her parents, she tiptoed to a close spot and knelt trembling, choking back sobs as she pleaded, "Dear moon, this time I ask not for new shoes or clothes, but to heal my ailing brother." Joecelyn held her breath, gazing imploringly at the silent moon, hoping for any signs her call was received. But the cold orb seemed to no longer smile upon her, just peering down wordlessly at the land below. Alright, kids, today's story ends here. See you next time.